just a moment. Things have been kind of moved around here just a little bit, so let me get everything set up. And imagine with me this morning that you're part of a large traveling family. You've got 12 brothers and a father who's a bit complicated. You have a mixed family situation that can be very confusing, and you're living in a land that is not your own. You're living in a foreign country. That's Dinah's story that we find in Genesis chapter 34. If you have been reading along with us during the week, this week you would have read the story of Dinah in Genesis 34. And we see there that Dinah is the daughter of Jacob. Jacob is, of course, the father of these 12 boys and Dinah. And so Dinah goes out to visit the women of the land. And we read there that she becomes a victim of a terrible injustice. She is mistreated by a man there by the name of Shechem. And she's left in a situation that seems hopeless. And when her father finds out about it, we read there that her father was silent. He just remained silent. He didn't address it. He didn't initially deal with it. But her brothers, on the other hand, her brothers were anything but silent. Now, let's be clear, and we're not going to go into all the details of the story, but the response of the brothers was wrong. The brothers responded out of anger and vengeance. The brothers responded in a way where they not only committed deception, but they committed murder. Their response was wrong. God did not approve of what Simeon and Levi did, and yet we find here within this story, and we see within their reactions, a powerful truth. And that is that love always steps up to lead. Love always steps up. Now, if we don't use God's wisdom, then we may step up and we may act in a wrong way. But love steps up. Now, this is a difficult story. It is a challenging story, and because we have a mixed audience today, we're not going to go into great detail about the story. But this story can help us see how love should lead us. Love should not lead us out of anger or revenge, but love should lead us with courage. Love should lead us to action. And love should lead us in hope. And so this morning we're going to walk through this and see 3 points about how love leads. And then the first thing we want to consider this morning is that love speaks up for the vulnerable. You see, there are all kinds of people around us who might not be able to speak for themselves, or who might need help, that they can't do things for themselves. We have vulnerable all around us. True love speaks up for those who are in need. When we look at Dinah's story, Dinah's brothers, when they heard what happened, they didn't just feel bad. They didn't just say, oh, that's terrible. And they didn't just sit around and talk about it. Verse 7 of chapter 34 tells us that the sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they heard of it. And the men were indignant and very angry because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing must not be done. Now notice they heard about it when they were in the field. What did they do? Did they say, well, when we get done tonight, we'll come back in and address it? No. When they found out about it, they heard about it, they were angry. They were indignant about it. They automatically had an outrage about what was happening. They immediately spoke up for their sister. Now, while they were right for speaking up, we recognize they were wrong in the way that they did it, and the way that they addressed it. And here's the thing that we have to remember when we are speaking up for the vulnerable. We cannot address sin with more sin. You see, these brothers were right in addressing sin. They were wrong in addressing sin with more sin. Let me give you an example. You and I have the opportunity every day to see immoral things taking place in our world. We see all kinds of things. We see it from a political standpoint. We see it from other aspects of just looking at what goes on in our world, right? And we see these injustices. Injustices and immoral acts that should outrage us. They should get us very upset. They should cause us to have a reaction. But how do we often react? We start calling the people who are involved names. We belittle them. We make fun of them. We react in a way by acting out in anger rather than stepping forward and doing what's right. In other words, we're addressing a sin, but we're addressing sin with more sin. You see, speaking out for those who are less fortunate, speaking out for those who are hurting, speaking out for those who are vulnerable, doesn't mean we just continue sinning. We address their sin with more sin. It means we meet their needs. We speak up for them. Let's look at what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 6 and 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 6 and 7. The Apostle Paul here is describing the love of God, what true love is. And he says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I want you to notice that one word that is repeated again and again. Always. That word leaves no room. It includes all the time. True love, love that emulates the love of God, always protects those who need to be protected. The love of God, the love that we're to emulate, always trusts. It always puts its hope in God, and it always keeps going. It never stops. You see, true love doesn't just suddenly decide it's not going to love anymore. True love keeps on, and true love protects. And so love speaks up. Love speaks up for those who have been treated unjustly or unfairly. Love stands up and speaks up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. True love, the love of God, speaks up. But number two, love that leads takes bold action. Love that leads does something. When we go back to the story of Dinah, we see that when her brothers responded, again, they didn't just talk about it, they took action. Now, their action was wrong. Their action was violent. It was not what God wanted. But we can learn from this. We can learn that love doesn't just feel, love does. Love does. Now, if we're following the wisdom of God and love as God loves, we're going to do what's right rather than what's wrong. But love takes action. Read with me in 1 John chapter 3. We're going to look at verses 16 through 18, and we want to walk through these verses one by one. And in verse 16, John says, "By this we know love." Now, I'll stop there. By By this we know love. By what do we know love? Well, he tells us, he says, that he laid down his life for us. That's how we know what love is. We know what true love is because Jesus Christ gave his life for us. He died on the cross for us. And it is that kind of love that we're talking about here. But notice what he says here. He says, by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. In other words, we should love one another in the same way that Jesus Christ has shown his love for us. We should love sacrificially. We should love by giving all of ourselves. We should love by doing all that we can do. We should love in the same way that Jesus Christ loves us. But then look at verse 17. In verse 17 it says, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Notice what he's saying here. He's saying, if you have the opportunity to help someone who is in need, and you choose not to help them, then the love of God is not in you. It is that simple. Notice verse 16, he says we are to love with a sacrificial love. And now he's saying, if you do not love in that way, then the love of God's not in you. That it's not a part of who you are. It's not a part of your identity. And then he closes us out in verse 18 by saying, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. What is he saying here? He is saying love does not just feel. Love does. Love takes action. Love gets involved. Love invests. And so yes, love speaks up. But love does more than just talk. Leading love acts. It does something. Love does. When a neighbor is going through an illness or a loss, love takes action. When you see a need in the church or even in the community, love takes action. When someone needs encouragement, when someone is hurting and struggling, love takes action. Love does. Leading love moves. Leading love acts. But then finally, a love that leads us to true renewal. Love leads to renewal. As we go back to the story of Dinah, we move from the story of these tragic events in chapter 34 to a different scene in chapter 35. In chapter 35, the scene does change, and we're going to read just verse 1 here, where it says, God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So God speaks to Jacob after these terrible events, after all this family tragedy. God speaks to Jacob and he says, Jacob, I want you to gather your family, I want you to move to Bethel, and I want you to worship me. Now think about that for a moment. Jacob's family was a mess. Jacob's family had all kinds of issues. They had done some terrible things and gone through some terrible things. And what is God's response? Worship me. I think there's a tremendous lesson there. But I want you to notice what happens, and we don't have the time to read through all of it today, but if you read through chapter 35, what you find there is that when Jacob gets this call from God, Jacob brings his whole family together, and he calls on his entire family to put away their foreign and to purify themselves. Now picture this for a moment. Here's Jacob and his family. They knew of God, and they did follow God to a degree, but they also had all these idols that they had collected when they had been living out among the people of the world. And they had all this idolatry that they were practicing. And now God has called them to come and just worship Him. And so Jacob finally steps up to lead his family. When he had been silent all of this time, Jacob finally steps up to lead, and he says, put away all these gods. We're only going to worship the one, the true God. And I think there's a tremendous lesson in here. And that is that even in the midst of family brokenness, even in the midst of family mistakes and problems, love leads us back to God. And love brings renewal. Is your family going through challenging moments in your life? In your family life? Come back to God. Worship Him. Love, His love, will bring renewal to your life. Are you personally going through a challenging time in your life? Are you personally dealing with struggles and issues in your life? Turn to God. Worship Him. His love will bring renewal to your life. One final passage this morning, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 1. 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 1, Paul says, since we have these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from every defilement of the body and spirit, bringing holiness to completion in the fear of God. We've been talking this year, our theme for 2026 is from promise to purpose. And so I want you to notice what he says here. He says, since we have these promises, now to know what promises he's talking about, you have to go to chapter 6. And there he's talking about the assurance that they are children of God, that they have a relationship with Him. And he says, since we have these promises, move to purpose. Cleanse yourselves. Get rid of all the defilement, the sinfulness in your life. And focus on holiness so that you can be complete in your relationship with God. Paul is telling the church of Corinth, move from promise to purpose. And be the people that God has called you to be. You see, when we focus on true love, when we focus on the love of God, He renews us, He restores us, and He brings us to His purpose. But ultimately, it's about love. You know, we see in our world a lot of people who love. And we can see how love sometimes hurts others when we love in a wrong way. Just like Dinah's brothers, we can love in a way that is hurtful, a way that is harmful, and a way that seeks vengeance. Or we can choose to lead with the love of God. We can choose to love the way God has loved us. You see, even when things go wrong, love leads us back to God and to renewal. When past mistakes haunt your life, love can lead to renewal by accepting God's forgiveness. When relationships have been damaged in your family or in your life relationships, love leads to renewal by pursuing reconciliation and healing. When patterns of sin in your life need to change, love leads to renewal by establishing new relationships, new habits, and by seeking accountability. You see, true love leads. And Dinah's story, as we conclude this morning, shows us what happens when love steps up without God's wisdom. It can lead to destruction, but when we combine love's passion with God's guidance, something beautiful happens. In 1 John chapter 4 and verse 19, we are told that we love because He first loved us. We know what love is today because God stepped up to lead for us. The reality is God steps up for us every day. God speaks for us when we can't speak for ourselves. He takes action on our behalf through Jesus Christ. And He leads us to renewal through His Holy Spirit. You see, God leads through love. And because of His love, we are able to love. We are able to love in the way that He has loved us. And so the question we have to ask this morning is, are we willing to fill ourselves up with God's love and lead with that love? Or are we going to get caught up in the stuff of the world and act out of vengeance and hate and hurt? Are we going to build up resentments and harbor guilt in our lives the way the world does? Or will we instead protect the vulnerable? Will we take bold action when it's needed to stand for those who are hurting? Will we pursue renewal and restoration instead of holding on to hurt and pain? Will we lead with the love of God? This morning, the only way we can lead with God's love is if we have God's love in our lives. And so the question ultimately this morning is, have you accepted the love of God? Have you made it a part of your life? The only way you can truly accept God's love is to become His child. You see, as children of God, we walk in His love. We don't walk in our perfection because we're far from it. We are still people dealing with brokenness, still dealing with sin, still dealing with challenges, still dealing with hurt. And yet we are renewed through the love of God as His children. This morning, if you're not a child of God, won't you give your life to Him? Won't you act on what He has called you to do, to come into a relationship with Him, to be His child, and to lead with His love? If you're subject to the invitation, we invite you to come. We stand.